Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on usability and accessibility. We've got an esteemed panel of people joining me here today to talk about some very real opportunities and issues with preparing and re-energizing any of your digital assets to make them more compliant and friendlier and just better overall in the terms of usability and accessibility. So I'm Michael Mathias, the CEO of Whereoware. I'll ask Jennifer and Kristen to introduce themselves as well. Jennifer.
Thank you, Michael. And hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Griffin-Smith. I'm the Chief Market Officer at Acquia. And we'll come on and describe who Acquia is in a little bit, I think, Michael, right?
Great.
I'm Kristen Scott. I direct the analytics team at Whereoware. Excited to talk about the measured aspects of usability and accessibility.
Terrific. So we have a number of sections here to walk through today. There's some context that I'd like to create up front about why this is important and why this should be a immediate focus, if it's not already in many of your different properties. We'll bring this to life with a composite persona of someone named Charlie. We'll talk about measurement. We'll talk about a couple quick case studies, some key takeaways, and then how to approach getting started. So without further ado, quick introductions about Whereoware and Acquia. Whereoware, we are a company that delivers custom digital solutions that align with business strategy. We support business goals and serve as a driver of smart growth. We are a very outcome-based, full-service digital agency where all the technology and the different partners that we engage with, none as lovely and wonderful as Acquia, but they all are brought to bear to create a real outcome for the clients that we work with.
And we are super proud to partner with you, Michael, and Whereoware. Acquia is a leading open digital experience platform. So our goal, our mission, is to empower our customers to build what we refer to as the most productive digital experiences for them to more powerfully connect with their audiences. And those productive experiences need to be fully inclusive, which is the topic of our session today, safe and accessible to everyone.
Jennifer, when we were preparing for this, there was a story that you told that I thought would resonate very well with the audience. And I'm hoping you can share this. So it's a picture that will say 1,000 words here and turn it over to you on that.
Yeah, I've been, as we work in this space very closely right now, I'm becoming more and more aware of digital accessibility. And I'm becoming aware of how I'm marketed to as a consumer too, not just a marketing practitioner. And I see a lot of organizations talking about how they're providing accessible services. So things like in an airport. So there's particular companies that will market to me about having accessible services within the airport. But I go to the beginning of that journey as a passenger and say, it's all very well and good when I get to the airport, if I have some kind of disability, but if I can't even book a ticket on your site because your digital experiences are not accessible, then it doesn't really help me in getting to the airport. So I feel like the difference between the physical world and the digital world is important for this conversation. We are focused on digital experiences, but quite often that's the start of any journey, right? And I just find it so interesting when I look at different companies, like I said, companies that I'm a consumer of, where they're not really focused on accessibility and where websites aren't accessible and where content isn't accessible. It's shocking to me. We'll get into some of the statistics later, but yeah, that story for me was like, well, great. You can have experts in sign language at the airport, but if your site isn't accessible, I can't even book a ticket.
When you tell that story, one of the things that really pops out to me is the work is never done, right? New channels, new media, new points of access are always going to be evolving. And how did they all get connected so the experience overall is consistent. And that's really what we're trying to drive at. So no one's left out, everyone's included, and the experience is transportable.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. We refer to it as no customer left behind, right? There should never be anybody that cannot engage with any of your digital properties. Yeah.
That's a great phrase. So simply a couple of words to start with here. Better accessibility is just simply better design. This isn't an afterthought. This isn't a let's do a sort of normal site and then make it accessible. It really needs to be part of how you go about understanding what you need to do for all of your population and all audiences. And there are some misconceptions when you sort of roll down another level to that. Misconception number one is accessibility only affects a small group of users, and we'll see some stats here to say that that's not true. Disabled users don't use my website. So you might think you've got a product or a service or something that targets a particular population. I will tell you that if you're not thinking that through, you are limiting your ability to reach very, very important consumers and very important partners and other folks. Misconception number three, making a website accessible is costly and time consuming. If it's part of the plan that's integrated up front, it's not. Again, usability, inclusivity, accessibility is just better design, and we all want the best design and the best experience possible. And then the fourth one, which sort of speaks to all these things, is, well, we can do our normal process, but at the end, we can do some quick changes and make it accessible before the release. And if it's not natively thought through in the application, that experience, much like Jennifer's talked about, being very disjointed, whether it's physical to digital or within different digital properties, it will appear disjointed. It will not be seamless, and that will not be the experience you're trying to drive at. So a couple stats here, which I found fascinating, I'd like to share. In the US, 1 in 4 adults are living with some type of disability. So just on the raw math of that, are you willing to discount 25% of the population immediately by saying, nope, not interested, we don't need them, we have everything we need? I don't know a marketer in the world that would say that consciously. But by not understanding what your accessibility, inclusivity, usability, what that experience is, you may be doing that and not realize that. So understanding how to connect with this part of your population not only is good for that population, it's good for your business. It gives you more people to contact and market to, connect with, bring across to your products and services or whatever it is you may be doing. Please.
A thought on that too, when you mentioned the 1 in 4 in itself is powerful, but disability isn't always lifetime disability. There are short-term, if somebody breaks their arm, they have a hard time using a keyboard, they still have to do their job, right? And so there are many different kinds of disability, both long and short term, that could make this number even worse as people get injured.
That's an excellent point, a very excellent point. There is a legal perspective of this as well. So with the rise in awareness around the different points of accessibility and inclusivity, there's also the exposure for companies that open themselves up, if they're not on the path to be that way, for real ramifications, lawsuits, things happening in the market. You can see here a survey done by accessibility.com. A couple thousand lawsuits have been filed, and 82% of the top 500 e-commerce companies have already been sued. And you can see that most of the vast majority, almost all, were predicated on the organization's desktop-based website. So consideration of this is very important. These are only the ones that were recorded too. As we know, with all activity in the space, of the couple thousand here that are reported, that could be a leading indicator that, maybe it's 5, 10, 20 times more than that of things that we don't see and are settled in some other way. So there is a real exposure to this. And on the next slide, you can see that the estimate on the implications in that same period, almost $7 billion in loss because of inaccessible websites, be it through loss of sales or in settlements or other type of legal activity. We also see that almost more than half of the consumers are willing to pay more to companies that are committed to digital accessibility. And I would add to that they'll pay more either consciously or unconsciously because they'll just be dealing with a experience that is better designed and more efficient. So there's pull through around that activity when they engage. And then, as a little bit to part of Jennifer's story about the airports and the airline, 74% of customers, which I actually think is low, expect to be able to do anything online that they can do in person or on phone. And if you put yourself in that position, what is your expectation? Regardless of if you are challenged with any kind of access issues or not, I know my expectation is that just the right amount of information will be available in every touch point when I interact with any company at any point, but not too much. And of course, that's a very difficult balance to strike, but it's what I expect. Going on, we would like to bring this to life. And we would like to, I'm going to turn this over to Kristen to talk about some samples of, just a few. And we've made a composite profile of someone called Charlie. And Jennifer mentioned the broken arm. You can see the rugby player there. That's in that case. It looks like he's taking some time off from his training and having some fast food there. So shame on him, perhaps. But Kristen, if you could take us through some of the examples of just a short list of accessibility in action.
Absolutely. So we're going to meet Charlie, and Charlie's going to represent, as Michael mentioned and Jennifer mentioned, a composite of things to consider when you're designing for accessibility and usability. So as we're meeting Charlie, the persona here, we see that Charlie has some motor function issues. He has some visual impairment and cognitive challenges. So let's really explore what it's like navigating a site with Charlie. So the first thing that we're going to look at here is Charlie experiencing motor function issues. I'm going to play this video right here. Before I play it, I want you to acknowledge where the mouse is. We're going to see a double mouse, and this is going to really acknowledge how Charlie is able to navigate this site and try to click on certain links. And you can see here that it's difficult for Charlie. There's a double mouse effect, and being able to navigate to the right content and then engage with the right content is challenging. So acknowledging that, what we want to consider here is how do we support Charlie as Charlie is experiencing the double mouse as an example. So some considerations here in terms of design for usability and accessibility would be keyboard navigable. So can Charlie, instead of using the mouse, use the keyboard to get to the right content? Is there space between components? For Charlie, is there enough space to be able to navigate and understand where one component ends and another begins? And another example here is mobile friendly. So if Charlie is on the go on a mobile device, making sure that Charlie is able to access the content and be able to really engage with the content. The next example here for Charlie is a visual impairment. So this is an example where Charlie is viewing the same site and viewing it with tunnel vision. So what's happening here as I click the video is you'll see that Charlie is seeing in a very narrow window portions of the site. So not able to see the whole site at one time, which is challenging again to get to the right information and can be frustrating to make sure that Charlie is getting again to the site or the pieces of the site that Charlie wants to see or navigate to. So a couple of considerations here in alignment to Charlie experiencing tunnel vision. So really follow web best practices for positioning key elements in content. You want to make sure that you're following the guidelines for accessibility and usability. Make sure that you differentiate your content and your ads, and maintain brand consistency. So there's consistency across the site that can lead to an easier navigable experience. Finally, here, we're going to go into the last example for Charlie, which is a cognitive challenge. So I'm going to play the video. You'll see in the background, there's going to be a narrative of Charlie's thoughts. I'll try to read those out as they pop up. I have to get back to work soon. The ventilation sounds a lot today. Bzz. Should I answer that text message? So you can see as Charlie is navigating this site, starting to experience the site, there's distractions that are happening. And so in trying to make sure that you're providing the best experience for Charlie, think about simple layouts, how to use white space to help content stand out, and really leverage content headings as a couple examples here. And so what this is supporting is making sure that you're providing a very clean space for Charlie to be able to get to that content where there might be distractions that might want to move Charlie away from that content. So just as we acknowledge here with just very, I would say a small amount of examples, again, just a composite as was mentioned by Michael. We also need to acknowledge some other areas that might be more temporary. So you might be outside as an example, and you might be under bright sunlight. And so you can see on the left-hand side here with our example, it's very difficult to view the images on the site, the links, the content in bright sunlight. So considering how you build a site with all of those aspects in mind, from bright sunlight to limited vocabulary or different languages, as well as farsightedness. So just an example, a little bit outside of our composite of Charlie that we want to make sure are considered.
So building on what we've learned about Charlie and the composite of some of the challenges that he's faced, Jennifer, I know that you commissioned some research with Acquia that went in market directly to some of the users and the population, and I found it just terrific and fascinating. Would you mind presenting some of that?
Sure. One of the things we find is that there's a lot of research where we're asking companies what they think. So we wanted to go and ask users with accessibility needs and really get to the heart of their feedback. And so we surveyed 1,200 self-identified users that self-identified as having a disability. And that was across the UK and the USA. And there was some really, really interesting feedback from those 1,200. First of all, 89% of them said they encounter accessibility issues that make it hard to interact. So you think that's like almost 90% of that entire sample size, and 1,200 is a good sample size, have some kind of issue interacting. And these experiences left 71% frustrated, 58% disappointed, and 24% angry. So there's this range of emotions going on with your brand when they're unable to, self-serve themselves. If you go to the next slide, some more information. So as a marketeer, I thought this was fascinating. So what's the impact of that on your brand? So let's look at some of these statistics. So 51% of people said if they were having an accessibility issue, that they would seek an alternative, right? So half of those people would go seek an alternative. 31% said they'd tell friends and family. Now, we all know in any business that referral is the best source of business. It doesn't matter what you're selling. So 31% telling friends and family is also not good for a brand. What worried me the most was the 20% share on social media. It might seem that 20% is small, but in this digital world we live, where user-generated content is so prolific now across all of the content creation, and is used more by buyers, right? People want to hear from other people. So think about the negative impact of 20% of those people sharing it on social media. That is not what you want as a brand, specifically if you're a consumer brand, let alone in a business. So I found these statistics fascinating. Only 34% would complain directly to the brand, meaning they'll tell family and friends, they'll share it on social media, or they'll just seek an alternative. And I think that's a big impact when we, as digital marketeers, are trying to get access to our audiences, which is hard, right? As marketeers today, it's hard. The digital landscape is very crowded. People have a lot of choice, regardless of whether you're buying a shirt, a car, or a piece of technology. There is choice out there on every level, and it's hard for us to break through this noise. And so by not thinking about this segment of people that are our consumers, we're really missing a huge part of our audience, and we're negatively impacting our brand with it. If you go to the next slide, I think we have some more. Yeah, 28% of those users think that companies talk about accessibility as a tactic, but don't actually really do anything with it. 33% think companies are covering it just for lawsuits. And I think lawsuits is definitely a reason why in business you'd want to be compliant and manage to regulations, but it's more than that, right? It's got to be part of your brand. And 12% don't believe that brands are thinking about doing anything to improve accessibility. I think people just take it as a status quo. And I believe as marketeers and brand ambassadors, we need to be educating our companies on the right thing to do for all of our audiences, and to be able to talk to all of those audiences. Do we have one more? That's it. Great. Yeah, very, very interesting statistics. Really makes me stand up and think there are things we can directly do to impact our brand as marketeers, but then there's these things that we don't do, that we don't know about, that also has a negative impact on our brand.
You think about connecting some of that information, some of that research with the market research up front, the numbers start to just magnify and become staggering of how many people are potentially ignored, how many people are upset and just passively disappear, and how many people then actively take a voice in voicing their displeasure, and with their ability to get to social media and other outlets, what the impact that has. So it ripples in so many directions very, very quickly. And again, going back to, it should just be good design anyway, and good thought anyway, not something that is this ominous set of circumstances that need to be retrofitted. It just simply should be better.
Yeah, I heard a speaker recently, an accessibility speaker, talk about, it's as if you would build a building and then think about putting the elevator in afterwards. That's not what you would do. And quite often, and some of those examples you talked about, Kristen, on the website examples, those are just good practice. I mean, how many of us use closed captions even if we don't have a disability, because we're in a place where we can't watch a video? Or imagine when videos don't have those closed captions, right? I mean, that to me is just like, that's a standard to appeal to everybody. And so some of these things they just make good sense.
And one of the things that we did see with Charlie in the recommendations is a lot of the recommendations really kind of repeated themselves. And exactly as you're mentioning, Jennifer and Michael, it's that good design. It's set good design, and that should really be mirrored in the accessibility and the usability design. And some areas here of thinking about, great, we are starting to understand the impact factors, the legal impact factors, the business impact factors, but where do we start? So as someone who is a leader of an analytics team, I think about always starting with measurement and understanding your baseline. And so what we want to review here in that same line is really focusing in on what are your goals and how do you measure to make sure that you are setting the standards for usability and accessibility. So a couple areas that we've called out here is you really want to make sure that you're understanding your conversion path. So you want to understand this for all users, which we called out earlier. Be inclusive. Don't try to take out the 25%, as was called out by Michael earlier in the stats. Understand your conversion path and start measuring. Where's the drop off? Who, in terms of those users maybe dropping off, what are some areas that are impacting them that could lead to drop off? And how is that impacting your bottom line, as was mentioned by the group here in terms of the business impact? So if you're not designing with all users in mind, you are really leaving a large chunk of business opportunities on the table there. And so, we talked about, making sure you understand your conversion or your path to conversion, but also it's how they're able to connect with you. Are they able to take action on all devices? Are they able to find you in search? Are they able to contact you, find product information? These are just examples here that we're calling out to make sure that you're assessing when you're thinking about usability and accessibility. So just going on to the next slide here, there's rules of thumb to think about, and then I'm going to talk about really the guidelines and the tiers of guidelines that you should consider. But really, in terms of rules of thumbs or heuristics, here are some areas when you're thinking about how do I then design or make updates to the site to really impact those measurable areas like the conversion path, as we mentioned. So think about error prevention. Think about setting up help documentation, visibility of system status, just as some examples here. So in doing so, you're really supporting getting to the growth of the highest tier here, which is AAA across the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG 2.2. So all of what I just mentioned is really the measured aspect of usability and accessibility. One of the things that we always talk about on my team is you should never just put a finger up in the air and say, I guess. You always want to back it in data, which we are excited to discuss in our next slide here. But really want to focus in on, there are aspects of measuring usability and accessibility, and would love for Michael and Jennifer to speak more on an exciting product here with Acquia Monsito that provides that measurability.
Yes, we're excited by it. So we have a new solution. It's called Acquia Monsito. It is an optimization solution, website optimization, including accessibility measures. I'm very lucky to work at a fantastic technology company that allows me to be customer zero. So me and my team, we use this. We have been running it on Acquia.com. It helped us identify where we actually had inaccessible areas on our site. It's helped us create a plan for what we need to change. And, we talk about progress, not perfection, right? It's really hard to know you've got to 100% accessibility on your site, accessible compliance. We are around 85% right now, and that has grown drastically. And Monsito, the solution, helps my web team to understand where they should focus. Even things down to things like, PDF remediation. I mean, I had no idea that screen readers can't read PDFs unless they're remediated, right? You think about all the content, and I think about all the time we spend on creating content within a marketing organization. That content isn't accessible, then it's useless, right? So, yeah, we're very excited about this. We're helping a lot of customers be able to improve how they can reach these audiences, and happy to have any conversations with anybody in terms of how we're using it internally ourselves.
What I really find interesting as a partner here with Acquia Monsito is the ability to iterate and keep using and keep expanding and trying this to see if it complies with what we think a best practice is. and getting results before it goes out to market and is tested, to be able to say, let's make some other changes, or there might be a better modification.
Yeah, yeah, very powerful.
And just one point from an analytics side, you can see in all of those areas that are listed here how you can measure the aspects of a site to make sure that you are growing on that baseline. And I think that's such an important factor here of you'll have a baseline when you run the scan, and making those improvements through your site, you will see that growth within Acquia Moncito.
Yeah, and we're looking, Kristen, we're running things and looking at, we're obviously wanting to grow our website statistics, right? And so we look at, volumes, but we are also more focused on conversion in our business. And so we're looking at we're seeing improvements in conversion as we improve our accessibility score. I don't think that it's, I think the correlation with the improvement, you can correlate that with the improvement in conversions because we're improving our accessibility. And that's really important for us, because the more people we drive to the site, the more people we want to consume our content, the more people we want to take action. And, the more we grow our brand, and that's the aim of the game.
We have a couple quick success stories here to bring some of this to bear, and you can see some examples here. The first example is with Outright International. It's been a client of Whereoware for some time. If you could scroll to the next, Kristen. So this was the website. This was something that had been built some time ago. You look at this and it looks like a nice website, a nice homepage. You've got a lot of very friendly, passionate, dedicated people that represent the organization, which we're very pleased to be working with. You've got nice, colorful blocks of type. You've got things. You look at this and say, all right, this makes sense for a mission-driven organization like this. But when you start to put the lens of, does this start to really comply with the best practices in accessibility? While there was nothing wrong with this site, it could be so much better. And so we call out a couple things here where the headlines and the call to actions just don't have enough contrast, and they're hard to really see because the background looks like they could be busy. In some cases, the quality of the photography could have been higher, so there was a little bit of blur, which of course gets exaggerated on bigger screens. It also gets exaggerated if you're challenged in any type of vision access. The font size itself could be larger and easier to read. And then the conversion from desktop to mobile was not as clean, as quick, and as readable as it could be. So we took all of that information, and the next release that we made, still keeping the spirit of the core values of the organization, cleaned this up and made this much higher accessible and much better overall user experience. So if you take the idea, again, accessibility out for a second, it's just a cleaner, more efficient, frictionless experience. There are a couple things here. We did certainly design it with a WCAG 2.1, AA best practices in mind. Now that it's a mouthful of technical jargon there, but there are standards by which we can understand. And of course, Acquia Moncito takes all those into consideration when it's scanning for some of these things to help. We certainly develop with that conformance, with the criteria to understand the screen reading. I think it's a great example that Jennifer called out on our own site, making sure that the content there, in addition to the contrast and hierarchy and color, was actually readable by other devices. On the next, you'll see that we made sure that all of the landing pages and all the links were accessible. If you could think about the motor skills that we talked about in Charlie, and also those navigations, all that, does that work? Is it easy to understand? And then most importantly, with all this, we remediated the critical violations. So the result of this on the next is, as we wait, we went from an accessibility score from 70 to 99, which we're very, very proud of. The search itself we really upgraded the search component to make all these different components accessible both on keyboard, mobile, mouse, and in doing that, Outright was recognized as a winner of a Web Award, Davie Award, and a W3 Award. So we're very proud to show the progress. Again, taking something that was good and just understanding how to make it that much better from a best practice standpoint.
It just
we've got
looks so much cleaner. I mean, it's when you see the contrast of the before and after, for me, just even visually, it's so much more appealing to me just as a viewer because it's not confusing.
To go back to the opening, it's just good design. It's just
Yeah.
good frictionless usability for everybody, for all population.
Yeah.
We've got another great example here. Kristen's going to walk through quickly.
Yes, so we're going to go through the site Vote 411, with our client, League of Women Voters. So this is just a before snapshot of the site. Again, extremely informational, which is really important to the design of this site. The real goal of this site is making sure that users can come to the site and see their voter information represented to them. Now, what you can probably also see is that there are components here that are clustered quite close together, which could be hard to navigate. You can see that there's text within images, which again can be hard for a screen reader to read. So just a couple of areas here where it's a good site, as Michael mentioned, but there's areas that could be supported. So a couple areas that we called out here is just updating to a more modern design. There's been shifts in design and really making sure that it's focused on accessibility, really engaging the audience as well. And then really focused in on the hierarchy. So there is a lot of call outs here, can be confusing in terms of what the hierarchy of the site is, how they navigate to deeper pages of the site. And then lastly here, as you can see called out in the bottom, there was not a mobile-friendly version of this site. So it could be very frustrating. As we know, we're in a mobile-first society. If you're trying to get that information on the go, especially if you're at a polling place, as an example, and you're on your phone and trying to get this information, could be very difficult to navigate the site, render the right information. So it could lead to frustration. So, this was the site redesign here. You can see much cleaner if we're looking at the navigable experience here. Very clear call to actions. We're seeing text that's not embedded in an image, that is readable by screen readers. The spacing here has been optimized and it's focused on mobile friendly. Really, as the design team took on this project, it was mobile first and making sure that we have a design here that people are going to be able to access as they're on the go, wherever they may be. If they're having a limited internet connection, really making sure that it was designed with all users in mind. So, as I mentioned, mobile first approach. Here are some really great examples of that mobile first experience. And really the call out here is there's a lot of interactivity through this site, which makes this site so engaging. You can select your state here and start to see some of the ballot information. And that was a little bit difficult, a little bit long to guide your way through on the previous site. So the team here really spent a lot of time on multiple ways that you could engage to get to your state information. Other areas here that were optimized by the team is making sure that the specific ballot information was accessible. So as you can see here, there's a lot of information displayed on these pages, everything from the races in a specific city to the details of the candidates, to some of the candidates' answers. And as you can see, that's a lot of information. So how to display that for all users in mind was really the first thought process that our teams had. So making sure that they were providing spacing, making sure that they were able to have screen readers read the site, acknowledging some of those composites areas, factors that we looked at with Charlie, where you might have tunnel vision or shakiness, and how someone can use this site and have it be accessible and really usable for all people. And, with this was user focus, but we also had a admin focus. So when we're thinking about designing, we're always thinking about the user, but the user may be also your own organization. As Jennifer mentioned, as Acquia ran Acquia Moncito on their own site, it's making sure that you have your organization in mind too. Your employees are also users of your site. And so really good example here, as we have these images placed, of how user-friendly backend was built to make sure that admins on the site could also input information really easily, and it was user-friendly and accessible. So, as was mentioned, focused on accessibility earlier on, the team mentioned in the beginning as we went through this presentation is you don't want to think about it as an afterthought. It should be the first thought as you start a project, and you should start really making sure that you're building in those checkpoints throughout the project to make sure that you're putting in those guidelines or rule of thumb to make sure that you're accessible, usable throughout the design process, build process, and updates. You have to think about it's not just when you're building something, you're maintaining as well. And so just a couple call outs here with the site redesign here. The team was able to reduce the critical accessibility violations to 0, which is fantastic, 0 per screen. And then increase the Lighthouse performance score 13 points from 84 to 97. So not only was it more accessible, more usable, the performance of the site increased.
That's great. So those are a couple examples. There are many, many, many others. There are so many different ways to continue to improve. And again, I'll put the bug in everyone's ear that it's iterative. It's never done. You always have to be considering the connectivity to all the different platforms and devices and different touch points along the way. So the formula at the end here is, taking usability plus accessibility, understanding them from the beginning, having best practices and making them native. It just creates a better experience for all population, includes everybody, expands the people we can talk to, decreases the amount of friction, any potential negatives that come out of issues around accessibility. It's just a design first, thought first, best practice. And we encourage you to get started, and we'll show you how here in 1 second.
Yes. So, one of the things that we're offering right now is immersive audits. So we're really doing these audits with workshops across these 4 criteria areas. So accessibility, heuristics, usability, and also competitive audits. So really making sure that your organization is putting into action all of the recommendations that we had above to really hit the points that Jennifer and Michael made of making sure that you are creating good design and you're making sure that you are considering all of the business impacts here as well as legal impacts that should be considered if you are not designing with usability and accessibility in mind.
So of course, Acquia Moncito is a very important part of this for us, and we would be delighted, along with Acquia, to help guide that. I will also then say that Whereoware's position, it goes beyond just that specific to all these different categories. And going back to the original stories, we want to make sure that we can reach as deep into the enterprise of different touch points as we possibly can, and at least consider them and provide some guidance and recommendations. Whether or not it is central to what we're doing or not, that's not the important part in particular. All right. We really appreciate you joining the webinar today. We appreciate your attention. Jennifer, thank you so much for the support from Acquia and you being here and representing both Acquia overall and Acquia Moncito, the exciting new technology tool that's out there that we're thrilled to be using. Kristen, as always, you do a wonderful job bringing this to life and creating real examples and showing the specifics around it and the measurement of such. And for any additional information we can provide, you see our email there, sales@whereoware.com, our website. Please do not hesitate to reach out about any inquiries or give us feedback on this webinar as well. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.